Casey, you recently issued this solicitation to vendors for cloud services for some kind of centralized cloud platform for government agencies. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish there? Is it just cost savings, lower barriers to innovation, just sharing of infrastructure? What are you trying to get at?
Well, it really goes back to the fact that this administration, the Obama administration, really wants to change the way that government leverages technology and make our IT, the $70+ billion that we spend every year, faster, lower cost, and more sustainable, more green. Cloud computing plays a key role in that because of its potential and the value proposition around cloud computing to do just that. GSA's role and our role in this is to make cloud computing solutions from industry available to federal agency customers in a way that's easy to use, that's simple, that abstracts a lot of the complexity that exists today. Because standing up new IT capabilities today is complex, it is time-consuming, there are lengthy and potentially confusing processes around procurement, security, and other compliance issues. And our goal is to help abstract some of those issues away and make the time to mission, the time to value, the time to accomplish the actual capabilities that these IT features are meant to support faster.
So you said you're going to be giving access to commercial cloud platforms. Are these going to be government only, or just literally we're going to see government agencies putting things out on Amazon Web Services or other cloud platforms?
I think we're going to see a variety of solutions because the federal government is so large, there will never be one solution that will work for everyone. Something like 45% of the IT portfolio is ranked at a FISMA certification level of low risk. So what that means is that those applications and that data, those solutions are candidates for a potential mixed environment, commercial, industry-provided solution. But there's the remaining elements and maybe some of those items that will never be in a public cloud that will be candidates for potentially a private or hybrid cloud.
Gotcha. So, Werner, you guys are obviously the ones with the most experience out there at offering these kinds of services. Maybe first of all, just for this audience who may not know exactly what we mean when we talk about cloud services, in particular the kind of infrastructure level services you provide, you might give us a rundown of just what that means. But also, I'd love to have you talk to us for a minute about how cloud changes the way developers work and what. Because it's sort of easy to imagine, oh, well, this is just kind of going back to the mainframe. You'll see that criticism, oh, yeah, it's just putting stuff on this big mainframe in the sky. And it isn't at all, I think. And if you could maybe talk to us about how the platform changes the way developers work.
Okay, so first of all, going back to the origins of Amazon Web Services, Amazon for itself needed to develop to virtualize its own infrastructure. At scale, Amazon was confronted with some of the same things that we just heard Casey mention, long development times, all driven by sort of what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting. All engineers needed to be concerned about massive scale of storage, high reliability, and all engineers were confronted basically with the same challenges. We decided to sync that into a short shared services platform where we virtualize most of the resources. Whether it's compute, whether it's storage. Now we give our engineers ultra-scalable, highly reliable storage services without them having to worry about multi-data center replication and things like that. Access to our compute environment in a matter of minutes, so you can scale up and scale down in a matter of minutes, which allows for great efficiencies. Remember that scalability is not only about scaling up, it is as much about scaling down where you actually do not need the resources. Which is one of the reasons why I think a large cloud such as that Amazon provides gives us the great efficiencies, because this is a shared resource where everybody can retract from if they do not need it and can acquire the resources on demand. So for our own developers, this was a great success. So we then turned around to the public and saw that there was a need there for similar services as well, where folks do not want to be bothered about things that do not differentiate their business. If you really want to focus on delivering value, you shouldn't spend, let's say, 70% of your resources on actually managing infrastructure, because everybody has to manage infrastructure. It doesn't build value. So delivering these services has meant that engineers and developers and businesses can now focus truly on creating value without having to worry about the constraints that managing your own infrastructure gives you.
I was just going to say, this also, when you talk about scaling down, it seems to me that, you know, here you started with a platform that you built because you were at very large scale and had very large problems. But the marketplace impact has been that you have the bar to entry to the market is so much lower, because before your basic ante to put up a service is you had to stand up a server, acquire a whole lot of bandwidth and so on. And now, you know, people can literally for a few $100s do a project that would previously have cost them.
Now, if you spend a few $100s, you've had a significant project.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've seen many projects that for $40 or $50 you're able to. For example, the Washington Post put up, during the campaign they received Hillary Clinton's schedule as First Lady for 8 years. However, they got it as images, and they wanted to make this searchable. Of course, they were competing with the other newspapers to get this online as quickly as possible. They didn't have the capacity themselves. They allocated 200 servers at Amazon, ran that for 6 hours, and at the end of the day, they had a fully searchable text index of Hillary Clinton's schedule. You know,
something
it
like
may have cost them,
pages.
what is it?
Yeah.
$50 maybe at
I think it was
most?
156 if I remember reading
Okay,
that.
so and there's a lot of stories like that. So,
Yeah.
but you know, cost savings is
Yeah,
very
200
cost
servers
savings is very important. But I think access to
Yeah.
resources that
Yeah.
you know, it removes the barrier for all sorts of innovation that was just not possible before, because folks had to buy their own hardware, had to manage it at scale.
That's right.
And you know, it's also innovation at the business level. You know, being able to actually only having to pay for that what you really use. No monthly contracts, no upfront negotiations, things like that. And whether that's at the server level or even at our CDN level. You know, there you're able to use these services, and if you no longer use them, you don't have to pay for them.
So, Casey, though, you mentioned FISMA, and that's it's great. There's 45% of government services could maybe exist out here in these private sector clouds. That means there's 55% where there's other kinds of constraints. Can you maybe talk to us about what some of the special constraints are that government agencies face, not only in sharing with the public, but also sharing among themselves?
Right.
Because obviously there's some agencies that go, okay, yeah, we don't mind. But I've heard lots of stories about, you know, the intelligence services don't want to share with each other. The military services don't want to share with each other. This agency doesn't want to share with that agency because they have, you know, their own. I think I heard the term. Was it cylinders of excellence?
That's a new one to me. You're pointing out a really important constraint that exists in the adoption of any new technology, and that is our culture. In some ways, the federal government is one very large customer, but in many ways, it's a great many very much smaller, more granular customers. Our budgets come from different sources. Our authorities are different. And so there are real barriers to sharing and to realizing the promise of cloud computing, which by its nature involves multi-tenancy. I think one of the countervailing value propositions of cloud computing, though, is that you can start small. You can go for those opportunities that are low-hanging fruit, and you can scale those solutions that work rapidly, and you can start to build a culture that is more embracing of information sharing and of sharing resources across organizational boundaries. So I believe the pendulum may move more in that direction.
Do you have thoughts about this idea of rapid development? You know, when people are, say, using Amazon Web Services, somebody stands up a service, all of a sudden developer has this crazy idea they can get access to 200 servers for 6 hours, and they build something that they wouldn't have built before. Does that translate to a government context, you know, where we have big procurements? I mean, how much room is there for that kind of experimentation within government, and how do we change the culture? We're going to have the capability from a raw technical, assuming you build your cloud infrastructure, but will we have, you know, the other processes in place that will allow that to happen? Or what do we need to do?
That is another cultural barrier to overcome, because right now there is, in general, not a culture of rapid development, of rapid release cycles, although we all recognize that there's value in taking that approach. Historically, more of the friction has been around those processes that go, not the development itself, which may be only a very small part of the end-to-end process. It has been more about the time to complete the procurement, the time to complete the security and other compliance processes. By taking some of those, some of that friction out of those processes, we free ourselves up to focus more on mission, to focus more on standing up those mission capabilities, and then I think we can move toward a culture of rapid development, because we will not be so consumed with the management of these commodity processes that everyone has to go through.
But still, part of the message here is, when you stand up your cloud computing platform, you're also going to have to re-engineer a lot of processes.
Yeah, it is not. It is,
and the way people think about using
world.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think there is a. If we look at for the new projects that folks often want to do, so imagine you want to move, you want to build new websites, you want to expose new data to citizens. Obvious, that's new development that's going to happen, and I think the cloud is ideal for that, because it can scale up and down. You do not know how many customers are going to use this, and so it's an ideal environment for that. I do think there's a lot of room for more traditional IT as well. We see that a lot of the Fortune 100 or 500 companies are moving just traditional enterprise services into the cloud, because it makes sense there just as well. Look at many HR processes. They are just as seasonal as that other processes are. There's a period maybe in your corporation where you do performance evaluation, and then there's a period where you do compliance training. And all of those are just as much seasonal processes where you can scale up and down, where normally you have to have an enormous server farm ready for to be able to do that. So many corporations are moving traditional IT into the cloud, just as that they are doing new development.
So I think that makes a really good point, but it raises another question. Are they feeling the need to build their own cloud, or are, say, Fortune 100 companies saying, some of these services we can put on, an Amazon or a Google Cloud or a Microsoft Cloud?
I think this is, so for most of cloud computing, I think this is really day one. Although we've been in this business for 3 years, I think the real impact on how it's going to change and how it's truly going to disrupt enterprise IT is something that's still in progress. I think this will maybe many years before we will see how deeply this has changed the way that enterprise IT works. And part of that, Amazon is also launching new services in response to what our customers are telling us. In this case, we recently launched a feature service called Virtual Private Cloud, which allows an enterprise or the government to cordon off a piece of the Amazon cloud and make it part of their internal data center infrastructure. So you get the advantages of scaling up and down in the cloud, access to resources. However, that side of the cloud is completely firewalled and is part of your own data center, and you can apply your own policy management and your own firewall techniques to those resources that live in that world. It's ideal for moving some of those more traditional IT processes into the cloud. So,
Casey, in your cloud RFI, I was struck, and I've mentioned this in a number of my talks, that 20% of the questions were about interoperability. What led you to the focus there?
Well, in the request for information to industry, we were really looking to understand the maturity of the infrastructure as a service in particular, from a variety of perspectives. So interoperability and portability were a key area of focus, as was security and business model issues and others. But interoperability and portability is really critical from a government perspective, because, as you said, we're at day one of cloud computing. As technology evolves, we as a customer or consumer of those services don't want to be locked into a technology that's not going to be cutting edge in 2 years. So we want to have that portability. We want to be able to migrate our solutions to the right platform as technology evolves. We also want to make sure that the government doesn't have to worry about managing the infrastructure because of migration issues, because, as you said, managing the infrastructure is a process we would like to abstract to the service provider level.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as an example of something that Anish Chopra was talking about the other day. One of the levers of influence that the federal government has is its own purchasing, one of the largest IT purchasers in the world. And clearly, there's a race on out there with a lot of people saying, I want to be the cloud provider. And, I'm a big believer in interoperability, and I want to see a world in which these services are interoperable. But one of the ways that people are dealing with this is there's a sort of an infrastructure layer, such as Amazon Web Services. There's other providers who are building higher level software as a service cloud offerings. How do you think about interoperability in a world where it's not just raw infrastructure you get access to?
Right. Well, there's been a lot of discussion here in the conference about data and about data being the real platform. So I don't think it has to be, the interoperability occurs only at the raw infrastructure level. We would welcome solutions that give us more of a meta layer that allows us to work more seamlessly across organizational boundaries. That would be a real value.
But for example, if you choose to be on the Salesforce platform or the Google platform or the Microsoft platform, you're really buying into a programming model at a slightly higher level than you are, if you're the raw infrastructure. Do you have thoughts about interoperability either at that level? Should we be looking for it, or is it just, hey, let people compete?
The government, as a customer, typically doesn't mandate standards, but we do encourage the development of standards that encourage interoperability and look to industry to help in that dialogue, because I think that we're at the early stages of that conversation.
So Werner, just curious, you offered kind of this lowest baseline level of services. In some sense, you're the Linux of cloud computing, whereas other people have kind of a much higher level stack. You can literally do anything on AWS. Why did you choose to start at that level?
I think because it is core to our mission, in terms of this is truly taking away the undifferentiated heavy lifting part, and it's something also that Amazon is really good at. It's something that we had to develop for ourselves. And to be honest, we poured a few billions of dollars over 12 years into actually developing this platform, and also to develop the expertise actually to operate something at this level. And Amazon, to be able to function as an infrastructure provider, you have to have unique skills, and one of them is to be able to really drive costs down. And Amazon, with its retail roots, really knows how to drive costs down and actually keep costs at that particular level. So I think there's some unique parts in Amazon's DNA that make us really suitable at that level. Coming back to the interoperability part, we were really concerned about it ourselves as well. So we made sure that the way that we developed our services, open protocols, HTTP, XML over HTTP, very simple, structured interfaces, without requiring our customers or the developers to actually, when they're using our compute service, to also use our storage service. If you just want to use Amazon S3, the storage service, with your own hosting provider, then you're free to do so. There is no packaged requirement or no lock-in. If you get service number 1, you have to use all the other services. That said, I think we're very early in the process of cloud computing, and what interoperability and standardization, what that really means, is something that we'll have to see in the future. So I'm really worried about doing this early standardization of a process where it's not a matter of agreeing on interfaces. It's more, there's a lot of semantics around what an interface actually means, and especially if you go up into the stack, if you think about interoperability, what data with CRM provider number 1 means may be something very different with the same data that you actually need to provide to CRM number 2 to actually move these things back and forth.
Okay, we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. So if you have one, can we get a mic out there?
I'm Giora Hadar from the FAA. I have a question for you, Casey. The question is about security that you touched upon a little bit. There are a lot of other government agencies that refuse to go to the public cloud, so to speak, because of security concerns. We hear rumors, for example, that Department of Interior is starting its own cloud to...
That who is starting their own cloud?
Department of Interior starting its own cloud. I guess it's going to be, sounds like competition with what you're trying to put together. I would like to hear your thoughts about the differences between what they may offer with private security versus what the vendors are going to offer on the public cloud.
If it's what I've heard about, that would be Interior's National Business Center that would be offering that as a service. They are a fee-for-service organization like GSA, and I'm not familiar with the particulars of what they're doing, but I think there's definitely a place, a necessary place for a private cloud. And it doesn't have to be something owned and operated by the government, although that is one. There's a variety of models that could work, and one that's a very traditional model is outsourced in operation to industry, but under government control and perhaps even in government facilities. So one of the issues of security is that with cloud computing, the boundaries that typically define a system have become blurred, and now you need to think about system boundaries in a different way and do your certification and accreditation differently. So in a private cloud, you have the opportunity to have more control and to maintain a boundary and a perimeter defense that is more well-defined. So I definitely think that is part of the overall solution, without a doubt.
So actually, I also would like to touch on the issue of security. There's even the premise of that the cloud could give you more security or better security than what you will be able to achieve by yourself. Really defending yourself and keeping your services secure is a highly specialized task. Just like making your site scale or keeping it reliable and keeping it up and running in 24/7. Security is a highly skilled environment with lots of technology around it. And actually the cloud may promise you an environment that actually is more secure than what you could achieve by yourself.
I think it's a really good point.
And so
yeah,
that's one side of it. And coming to certification, let's take for example HIPAA, which is the certification process or the regulatory process around storing healthcare data. We have a number of customers that have been able to achieve HIPAA certification on our platform, because actually these kind of certifications are end-to-end certifications. It's not just a matter of the infrastructure laying being HIPAA certified. No, it's the overall process that needs to be certified. And as such, infrastructure just plays a role in it, and certification is a much bigger picture than only cloud computing pieces.
All right, I think we have one more question.
Yeah, and then Lynn has a question.
Oh.
Yes, Tim, this is Dan Burton with Salesforce.com. Just a point of clarification about interoperability. Salesforce does interoperate with Google and Amazon and Twitter and Facebook. So I think what you're going to find is when you get cloud platforms that support open web standards, a lot of the interoperability questions are not going to be nearly as severe as some of the discussion has led us to believe.
Okay, that's okay. And then we got one question from Manuel. So, by the way, just before we go there, Dan, thanks for the clarification. I mean, it's pretty clear. I think everybody agrees we're on day one here, to use the phrase that Jeff Bezos uses all the time. And there's a lot yet to be invented, and you guys are doing a great job there at building out a platform that is, as you say, working in interoperability.
And also focusing on interoperability, because Force.com allows customers to build highly scalable applications on Amazon.com, yet integrate Salesforce data into that in a very simple manner.
Yeah. Lynn.
Lynn Wells from National Defense University. Just coming back to security, who sets the policy government-wide for this? I mean, right now there's kind of agency by agency, even within agency, different departments. Who should set it, and how do you see us getting to the point where one common standard could be applied across government for clouds?
Well, NIST sets the guidance, the 800-53 controls, and they don't have authority over agencies, but they do lay out the guidance that we must follow in doing our certification and accreditation. I think there is a place for more shared CNAs, more shared authority to operate, and I think that the administration is going to have to take a lead in making that happen, because that is a centralized function. If you're going to do it that way, it takes leadership from the top.
All right.
Actually, so I want to add to that. So policy control and policy controls of cloud resources, I think, is something that is a new area where a lot of innovation is going to happen. We recently launched one of our new services with a very extensive policy control language, such that policy controls at the top can actually easily translate down into controlling these different resources. Very fine-grained control mechanisms are now in place just beyond the simple password or key value store
All right.
mechanisms.
With that, I think we're going to have to wrap up. Thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.